And welcome back. Now this is part 2 of the video on how we can create some web pages on our ESP32, yes, this rather lonely ESP32, and make our programs a little bit more responsive to our requests and displaying information on things like phones and browsers generally. Now last week we got to a certain stage where at least we had a landing page on here and we could upload code to it. But this week we want to go further. I want to give a big shout out to PCB Way, PCB Prototype the easy way. Now we're all well aware of the $5 for 10 pieces PCB, but I've got some real practical examples that I've ordered recently. Let's have a look at those. So here we have a very small double-sided panelized board that enables me to create a tiny little display unit. Look at that, how cool is that? And at the other end, look at this pond controller. Mains voltage, absolutely wonderful. That looks pretty cool too, doesn't it? And that's been running for some time now. Yeah, PCB Way has excellence in their PCB department, but that's not all they do. Look at this. Just look at their products and capabilities. Apart from printed circuit boards of all types, they do PCB assembly, double-sided, through-hole, surface mount, you name it, which means you can design a prototype for yourself or your company and have it assembled by PCB Way for the cost of the shipping. And if you want some 3D printing done, these are the people to do it for you as well. PCB Way. Why don't you try them out now? Yes, indeed. Now, this week we're going to pretend that we've put this little sensor here. Let's see this little tiny sensor. This is a DS18b20. It's a temperature sensor. And the good thing about these little sensors is that they have a unique ID on them. So you could actually put half a dozen of these in parallel, all these connected to the other leads. Yeah. So just put them in a breadboard one after the other. Find out what the unique ID is of each before you do it. And then you can say, sensor XYZ, give me your temperature. Sensor ABC, give me your temperature. Yeah, it's amazing. So here on eBay, here's that exact same temperature sensor, the DS18b20, 5 pieces for £4.60, which isn't too bad a deal, I don't think, really. Now, there's lots of places that sell these. This is one of the most common temperature sensors you can find out there, and they work pretty well. I mean, plus or minus a degree or so, perhaps less than that, actually. I found them pretty accurate. Now, this is a well-known UK retailer. The Pi Hut sells everything about Raspberry Pis, but more than that. But they do the waterproof one that I've shown you there. £3.50, not too bad. You can, of course, get them cheap if you want to buy them from the Far East. Take you a while. But I'd say buy more than one. And if you want it dead accurate, be prepared to sort of be a bit selective. Try one out, then try another one. It's only 3 wires, as you can see there. You've got power, you've got ground, you've got the yellow signal wire, and you need a little resistor to go between the power and the signal wire just to make it all tickety-boo. However, most of the time we normally only use one sensor. I mean, I've got one sensor poking outside my workshop here at the back of it to give me a sensor reading, and I only need one sensor for that, and I've got one sensor down there on the wall as part of my smart heater controller. So unless you're going to have multiple sensors, well, why are we going through the hassle of saying I've got to find out what the unique ID is of that? So what I do is this, and this is it. Now, Mr. Rob Tillotson wrote this, and he says it's only for one device per pin on your whatever it is MCU. Now, of course, he talks about Arduinos, but your DS18b20 works just the same on the ESP32. In fact, I've got several scattered around, well, my attic and workshop and everywhere, and they work absolutely fine. And it means that the library is A, smaller, and B, simpler, because it doesn't have to worry about what the ID of that device is on your pin. It just says go and give me the temperature, and it does. Brilliant. So I'll put a link to this in the GitHub and the video description below, and you can go and play about with this. So we want to go from this sort of landing page to one where we're going to put that sensor value on here, and we'll pretend we've taken the value, all right, and we'll say it's 42 degrees, wherever that may be, and we want it to look a little bit like this. Right now you see the number 42 has appeared 3 times on that page. First of all, up in the tab at the top there, you'll see that it's been injected as part of the title of this page. Then we've appended it to the H1, the header at the top, and we've actually included it here as part of an input string. Now, an input field on a web page for an ESP32. I'm not sure how useful that is. I don't think I've ever used one actually, but we'll think about that as we go forward. But we want this page we're pretending that this page is now displaying perhaps a temperature sensor or something. And as you can see at the top there's another tab called Smart Heater Controller. Now that's my real live Smart Heater Controller that I've built. And that gives a few more readings, real actual readings, live readings if you like. And it looks like this. Here we are. Now this has not been optimized for a desktop browser. As you can see at the top there, it says your browser is a desktop, because I needed to detect when it was on my phone. So I was putting a little message at the top to say, you're a desktop or you're a phone. So it's not been optimized for a desktop, which is why the table's far too wide, but I don't care because I never look at it on a desktop. It's always on my phone. But as you can see, there are a number of sensors on here. That's a DS18b20 with the waterproof sleeving on it, I suppose you'd call it, wouldn't you? Look at this here, this sort of heat shrink. It's sort of waterproof, but it is only heat shrink. If you're going to make it totally waterproof, you'd be advised to sort of slide this off, and I think it will come off, and just put a tiny bit of sealant behind there to stop any water getting in. So we'll just pretend that this page over here, the landing page 42, is pretty much something like that, a cut down version of that with this single value coming in. And we'll see how we can get that single value on this page. But you may also have noticed that I've put a string in here. Look, I've added in those words and wonderfully written. So the original one just said this is a descriptive paragraph for your landing page, but we've injected this other string in the middle. How do we do all that? Let's have a quick look at the code. Now the code is exactly the same as we had last time, and there's a copy of this code in the GitHub from that previous video. The only thing I've added in at the moment are these two values here, which we're pretending this special value. We're just going to pretend that's a sensor reading you've taken from that DS18b20, and I've got this string here that we're going to inject. I couldn't really think of a real life situation where you'd have a string, but you might want to output various variables as a string rather than a number. For example, if 42 were an error message that you've received from something, it goes, oh no, error 42. Well, that's not very meaningful, is it? So you might want to translate in your code 42 to Wi-Fi not available, for example, and output that to your web page, which you can then read and immediately understand, rather than have to look up number 42. So we want to inject both those values, 42 and that little string there, into the web page. And there's two ways of doing it. There's a quick and dirty way, which I must admit I tend to use all the time, but there's a much nicer way of doing it, and it's a little bit more flexible, I think. Now this is exactly the same code as we had in that previous video. The one difference we got now is that this output HTML string that's going to go out has actually been put into a string variable. As you can see there, we're calling it HTML output, so we can manipulate it basically, rather than just sending it straight back to the browser. So we get to the point down here where we say this is a descriptive and wonderfully written we want to insert now. So we terminate this raw literal here that starts up there. We terminate it here. We append as part of HTML output that variable web page desk, and then we start the raw literal again and append it to this HTML output using the plus equals construct. And that is it. So you can see this whole structure here is just one big raw literal that goes down to here. It's then it's broken at that point. We insert what we want as a string, and then we carry on with the rest of it. So if you had half a dozen things you want to insert into that HTML, you'd be chopping it up along the way. It's quick and dirty, but it works. It does sort of destroy the output a little bit from what you can see there on screen, but you have to decide, do I want a nice clean page output, or am I prepared to chop it up as need be? Okay, that's fine, but what about the number 42 then? Where's that suddenly disappeared to? Okay, this is the second way of doing it, okay, where we have an HTML string or page, and we go, I'm putting some placeholders where the output's going to go. So I've called it palm1 because it's pretty generic, but you probably would call it something else. So in my title I've put landing at palm1 page. Well, you might put at temp reading, or at temp sensor, or at DS18b20, something that something that's going to be unique to you that you will remember because you need that value going forward. But I've put at palm1 just to make it very generic, and we've done that 3 times on this page. So we put it in the title, we put it also in the big header here, look, heading 1, my landing page, at palm1, and we've done it down here as part of the input field. We've got an input field on that web page, and we said the value is at palm1, so it'll come up as an input field that's pre-filled for you. Okay, so how do we get the value into that string? Okay, well, we'd write a function. Now, hang on to your hats because we've got to talk about C++ now. Okay, so we've got the HTML string all set up. It's got this at palm1 in the middle of it, and we want to substitute our real value instead of palm1. So I'm calling this routine here called update palm1. You, for goodness sake, don't call it that. Call it update values or something that's meaningful. But for a demo, I thought I'd keep it the same. Here's our string, look, HTML output. What's that? Why has it got an ampersand at the front of it? Okay, imagine this then. You've got your nice big HTML string, and if you were to pass that without the ampersand sign at the front, what would happen? You at the back? Yes, exactly. C++ or the compiler would say you're passing this by value. Now that means it's taking a copy of that string, stuffing it into that routine there and going, here you go, here's a copy of that string, get on with it, which doesn't help us in 2 ways. One, we're making a copy, yeah, and memory is scarce, even on the ESP32, it doesn't go on forever, right? So we're making a copy of this big huge string, giving it to the function, but the function can't update that string, it's being passed by value. We don't want a copy of the string being passed to it. We want the actual string passed to it. So the ampersand at the front says we're passing this by reference, which means the compiler says it's that string over there called HTML output that this code has already got sorted out up there. So as we call the function, it says that string there called HTML output. That's the one I'm pointing you to. Great. And then we're passing it, yes, actual strings, because this is the string we're trying to find in that HTML output, and this is the value, look, special value, and that's going to be 42, but we're converting it here to a string because after all the output is a string. Yeah, you might view it as a number in your code, but when you output things, they're pretty much always strings. So what does this function here actually do? Well, let's hit F12 and find out, shall we? Okay, so this is the function, update the parameter. Here's the input string that we've just spoke about. What's that? Why has it now got a star in front of it? Okay, this asterisk means this is not being passed by value. In other words, it's not a copy of a string. It's a pointer to a variable somewhere. And as we know, the compiler's passed the pointer in to the HTML string declared in the calling routine. So this function does not have a copy of that string to work with. It actually has to look at the real one up in the calling routine and go, ah, that one over there, which is good because we want to actually update that one over there, don't we, with the real value. So we have the 2 other parameters coming in. One's the value that we're trying to find, which is at palm1, and the other one is the value we want to replace it with, which, as you saw, we've converted our value of 42 into a string. So replace with actually contains 42. This bit of code here goes round a loop going find at palm1 as many times as you can, and each time you find it, replace it here, because we've got string.replace with the value. Okay, what another, yes, you're at the back, what's the question? Okay, why have we done this here? Copy the string into something else. I decided to do that because I think for beginners it's easier to understand you're working locally with an actual string called temp string. Yeah, it's a temporary string that you're working with locally just within this scope here. And yes, it does use memory and all the rest of it, but we're still, you know, calling it temp string, and I think it's easier to see what's going on. So we put the contents, if you like, of this string into this one here, so we can work with it, replace all the prom ones, and then put it back from temp string back into where HTML string is pointing to. Okay, just if that all is a bit, just go with the flow and say, okay, we're making it into a copy locally, doing all our work, and then putting it back again where the compiler can find it. Okay, so what we've actually done then, we've replaced all occurrences of @palm1 with the value, and you can do that, of course, for any parameter. Yeah, so if you've got @palm2, or better still, @temp2, or @location, or any name you care to think of that's meaningful, you can do that via this method, and it makes it nice and easy. And going forward, this is a good thing to learn how to do, because what we don't want really is all that big string in our code in the first place, do we? But that's another step. So having modified that big string now with our values and the string values that we've talked about, we're saying, great, output that as part of the response, send the response, and that's it. That's when you get this request for this page. So having done all that, we get the output we expected and that you saw a little bit earlier on. Marvelous, excellent. This is real live code. As you can see, there's an actual IP address at the top there. So it's running from that ESP32 on my workbench here. Great. So is that it then? Have we done? I mean, can we just expand upon this and put more variables in there and stuff, you know? Well, there's another step that you can go to. You can keep it like this if you like, and chop up your HTML and just inject the values where you need to inject them. It can get a bit messy. There's a better way, and I think we'll just quickly talk about that next. So just to recap then, in this video what we've managed to do is to output some variables onto the screen, and I've shown you how to put an input field on there as well, but we've not actually looked at how we can read those values back, which is fairly simple, but you know, it's still another step. But more than that, we've still got all the HTML, and that could be significant with a complex page built into the actual code, which isn't great, is it? Even if we have learnt how to sort of split up that string to inject some values. And it works fine for smaller little programs. And indeed, as I say, I use it all the time here. But there is a much better way in which we can have our HTML pages separate and self-contained. And should you want to change the HTML, which does include, of course, the CSS and JavaScript and stuff, we can have all that separate and indeed upload it over the air separately without affecting the sketch. We'll look at all that in a future video, part 3 if you like. But I think in this video I think we've done enough, and we will definitely revisit how we can get some values into that ESP32. After all, I update stuff in my world clock and my pond, you know, clicking buttons. It's not rocket science, but you do have to do it step by step. So in the meantime, I highly recommend you download from the internet both the previous video's code and just get that working. So you've got your landing page. Then you can try it with this one and get some more information out on it and see which way works best for you. And then in a future video, we'll all come together and bring all the loose ends together, just to see how straightforward it is once you've got those two things under your belt to make this really interactive, and maybe that ESP32 won't be quite so lonely after all. Now, if you like these sort of videos, don't forget, you got to subscribe and tick the bell. I know it's a two-stage operation. Subscribe, tick the bell, and remember, if you've got something to say, please do put a comment down below. I really look forward to reading your comments, whether you've got suggestions, improvements, questions, whatever. Yeah. And remember, if you like this sort of video, let's give it a thumbs up so I get the hey, yay. Yeah, that's what I like to hear, because YouTube then makes this video available to more viewers. Yeah, the more the merrier. Okay, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. I hope you're finding these videos useful and interesting. There are plenty more videos to choose and a couple are shown below. And if you'd like to subscribe to this channel, just click on my picture below and enjoy the rest of the videos. Thanks for watching.